Welcome back. We want to get back to that Middle East deal we've just been reporting on. You may have just seen us reporting on the signing of this historic deal. The President Trump has called it, between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington today, overseen by Donald Trump, signing a peace accord with the UAE. And there's one in the pipeline as well with Bahrain. But left out of it all, it seems, was the Palestinian Authority. Well, I'm joined now by Ambassador Husam Zomlot, who's head of the Palestinian mission to the UK, also a strategic affairs advisor to the Palestinian president. Very good to talk to you. Well, your reaction to watching those scenes a few hours ago in Washington, has the Palestinian Authority been sidelined?
Well, my reaction is, and our reaction, it's bizarre, really, surreal. I mean, peace in the Middle East, two foreign ministers from the Gulf countries sitting with the Israeli Prime Minister, the occupying power, in the absence of the Palestinian people and leadership. And, you know, I spent my morning today connecting with many UK charities, medical charities, to try and find basic tools and medical equipments to hospitals in Jerusalem, heart patients, because Trump has cut all funding to these hospitals. I spent my morning about COVID-19 spreading in Gaza and following some serious issues of house demolitions in the West Bank. People losing their land because of the mushrooming land grab.
What issues that matter to real people?
What peace are they talking about?
Well, indeed.
As I just arrived to this studio, I saw in the news that there was a rocket coming from Gaza, and sirens were alarmed in all of Israel. What are they talking about? This is a media stunt.
I want to talk to you about Gaza in a moment or two. But overall, I mean, have there been any contacts between the Americans and the Palestinians? Have you been entirely cut out of the process? What have you been saying? You've seen it developing in front of you. You've seen Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, who seems to have brokered all this, shuttling back and forth to the region for quite a long time now. Have you been able to intervene, or just been cut out?
Well, no, we engaged the President Trump and his administration for a long time. In fact, I was the ambassador to Washington, so I was, the key contact person for the White House, for Mr. Kushner. My president met President Trump at least 4 times in a matter of weeks. It was very intensive, very promising. And we must have met his team more than 36 times, Mr. Kushner and Greenblatt.
You say promising. Are you surprised then about what's occurred?
Of course, because the backstabbing started immediately, and they thought they could simply blackmail us, and they could, do these media stunts and shows and bypass the Palestinian people. What they're trying to do is simply to bully us into submission. We said this doesn't work because, our issue is not a real estate issue. You don't trade money for buildings. Our issue is an issue of rights. I mean, the right of self-determination, for you to have a home and call it your own state, for your people to have dignity and freedom. And these are not rights that you can negotiate. And these are not issues that you can actually bully the other side to forego. Our position is to stick with international resolutions, international legitimacy.
Which is seeking a two-state solution, a Palestinian state. But couldn't this peace between these Gulf nations and Israel be part of the route to that two states?
We wish it would have been. The Arab Peace Initiative is very clear. I mean, that should Israel end its occupation of Palestinian land, should a final deal be achieved with the Palestinian people, then the region will normalize with Israel. That was meant to be an incentive for Netanyahu and for the Israeli government. Now you tell me Israel has more incentive or less incentive. I'll tell you the example. Since these two agreements have been talked about, Netanyahu has quadrupled settlement expansion. His promise to annex is only suspended for some time. It's a sword on our neck, and he's going to do it at any point in time. The house demolition is at historically high rate. So, on the ground, this has been a license to actually turn the occupation into a permanent situation and to recklessly wreak havoc in everything.
But if the Israeli people, as a result of this, feel a little bit more secure in their homeland, surely they will be more minded to come to some accommodation with the Palestinian Authority. It's inching along there, isn't it?
Pardon me, I mean, feel secure because of Emirates and Bahrain have never fired a bullet or even engaged with Israel. There was no conflict between these two countries.
But not recognized Israel, the right of Israel to exist.
The conflict is with the people of Palestine, and the conflict has been lasting for 70 years, and the people of Palestine are on the land of Palestine. They live there. We own every house, every church, every mosque, every shop. We're going nowhere. The abracadabra of Netanyahu and Trump today, as if we have disappeared, is not going to last for a long time. These two Arab countries have unilaterally departed from the Arab consensus, but we still remain to have a consensus in the Arab world about the sequence of normalization. It has to start when occupation ends and when a final agreement, including Saudi Arabia for that matter.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because what do you make of this, and what are they going to be making of this in Tehran, and what are they going to be making of this in Gaza? You mentioned more rockets fired today from Gaza. Well, quite clearly in Gaza, they align with the Iranians. Now the Iranians see this build-up of what they deem to be their enemies in the region. Saudi Arabia, no doubt, involved in this peace move so far with Bahrain and the UAE. What about then on the West Bank? Are you more likely to turn to Tehran as well?
That's a very relevant question and the right question. Actually, what is happening as we speak in Washington does empower those maximalists in all sides, does give such a pretext to say, here you go, we told you. And it does disempower those who believe in international law, international legitimacy, those people like us who really think that rules should apply on all nations. I tell you, we have been weakened.
Well, how are you going to answer those voices on the West Bank?
We will keep on. We will be principled. We will clench into international law. We will be so religious about multilateralism. And we will continue our journey, because this is not going to be undermined only by such a media stunt and a circus. It's a circus. It's an election circus. We understand. We understand the sheer pressure put on these countries by the Trump administration. Guess what? We were subjected to this pressure. I was in Washington when they cut all funding, defunded UNRWA, defunded our hospitals, when they closed our mission, when I was the head of the mission in Washington. Actually, they took my kids, a 7 years old, Saeed, and a 5-year-old Alma, my kids, out of school in the middle of the school year. All this was blackmailing us into submission, but we stood tall. We stood tall because we have so much to gain out of peace. We are the side who want to see peace in the Middle East.
In terms, you mentioned the electoral politics taking place, of course, in the United States. If there isn't a change of administration, do you see any hope of progress?
Well, regardless of any change in American elections, we have been firm and clear. Our clarity is in line with international resolutions and with the UK position and the rest of the world. We will remain principled. There are two camps. There are the camps who are in the arena of circus. They are after personal gains. Netanyahu is trying to dodge the criminal charges, become the king of Israel, promising the public that he can actually have everything, the cake and eat it too, and Trump is doing the same. But there is the second camp. The second camp is those who believe in multilateralism, in international rules. Those who learned the lesson of the Second World War. We belong to the second camp, and we will remain so faithful.
Still hopes on a multilateral solution. Husam Zomlot, thank you very much indeed. Very good to see you here. And you're watching Sky News Tonight. Coming up, the government admits there are operational problems